Hello, welcome to the Purple Planet, where we help you drift into dreamland with the timeless and historical tales of queens, empresses, priestesses, and warriors from across the ages. The night air in early 19th century Hawaii shimmered with the scent of plumeria and sea salt. Palm trees swayed gently beneath the patient gaze of the moon, their feathery fronds whispering secrets to the breeze. From the black sands of Hilo to the sunlit coves of Maui, the island seemed to breathe in rhythm with a deep, endless ocean, a world suspended between the ancient past and the promise of something new. In the distance, the steady percussion of the surf mingled with the soft calls of night birds, as if the land itself were humming a lullaby older than memory. It was in this time when flickering torches glowed in the cool dusk and the chiefs gathered in the great halls beneath woven roofs that a singular voice began to rise, a voice that would echo through the valleys and over the mountains, changing the course of Hawaii forever. Her name was Kaʻahumanu, and she was to become one of the most powerful and transformative figures in all Hawaiian history. Born of noble blood, Kaʻahumanu's lineage traced back to the revered alii of Maui and Hawaii, her ancestry shimmering with stories of warriors and wisdom keepers. Yet her life would be marked not only by birthright, but by a restless intelligence and a will as resolute as the tides. She would rise from the quiet gardens of her childhood to stand beside Kamehameha, the Great, as his favored wife, his confidant, his political partner. And when the king's voice faded from the world, Kaʻahumanu's own would ring out, bold and unyielding, guiding her people through a time of fracture and renewal. Tonight, we drift back to those fragrant shores and listen for her story. We trace her journey from the mist-veiled cliffs of Hana to the regal courts of Kailua Kona, from the strict shadows of the kapu system to the dawn of a new faith and a new law, through lush gardens and feathered capes, through torchlit councils and the hush of royal tombs. The story of Queen Kaʻahumanu unfolds, a story of courage, transformation, and the enduring spirit of Hawaii itself. Kaʻahumanu's story began in the green embrace of Hana Maui, where waterfalls tumbled endlessly into fern-choked ravines, and the air was thick with the chorus of birds and the perfume of blooming ginger. It was around the 17th day of March in the year 1768 that she entered the world, a child of destiny, born beneath a sky streaked with the color of dawn. Her father was Keeaumoku Papayahiahi, a chief of formidable presence and cunning, whose loyalty and strength would one day help lift Kamehameha to unrivaled power. Her mother, Namahana, traced her lineage to the highest reaches of Ali'i nobility, her ancestors keepers of sacred knowledge and ancient songs. From both, Kaʻahumanu inherited the gravity of leadership and the subtle art of navigating the swirling currents of chiefly politics. As a young girl, she wandered the lush gardens and taro patches of Hana, her bare feet pressing softly into the damp earth. She learned to read the language of the wind and the wisdom of the elders, their stories swirling around her like the patterns in a kapa cloth. At dusk, as the sun painted the hills with gold, she would sit at her mother's side, listening to tales of gods and voyagers, of battles fought and peace brokered beneath the watching stars. From the earliest days, Kaʻahumanu was marked by a striking beauty, her eyes sharp and alive, her movements graceful as the white tropic birds gliding above the cliffs. Yet it was her mind that drew the admiration of her elders. She learned quickly, absorbing the lessons of hula and chant, of diplomacy, and the rigid protocols of court. The kapu system governed every gesture and word, dividing sacred from common, men from women, ali'i from maka'ainana. Even as a child, Kaʻahumanu seemed to sense the tension in these invisible lines, her curiosity pressing always against the boundaries. The ali'i of Maui watched her grow, noting her poise and cleverness. She moved with the assurance of one destined to shape the world around her, her laughter bright in the cool morning air, her questions unafraid. It was said that Kaʻahumanu's spirit was restless, a wind that could not be stilled, a force that gathered strength as it swept along the valleys and shores. At the age of 13, her life changed forever. She was chosen to become one of the first and most favored wives of Kamehameha, the ambitious chief whose dreams reached across the islands. Their union was more than a marriage. It was a joining of powerful bloodlines, a careful weaving of alliances that would shape the destiny of Hawaiʻi. Kaʻahumanu left behind the familiar pathways of Hana, stepping into the dazzling, unpredictable world of Kamehameha's court. There, among the rustling feathered cloaks and the low murmur of counsel, she began her ascent, not merely as a consort, but as a force whose influence would one day reach farther than even Kamehameha could imagine. The sea breezes that once tousled her childhood hair now carried with them the distant roar of change. Life at Kamehameha's court shimmered with ceremony and intrigue, a place where every gesture held meaning and every alliance was woven with care, like the lauhala mats beneath their feet. Kaʻahumanu entered this world as more than a young bride. She arrived with the bearing of an advisor, her mind alert to the subtle tides of power that flowed through the royal circle. Kamehameha himself was a man of extraordinary will, his ambitions stretching across the channels that separated the islands. Yet even he recognized in Kaʻahumanu an intelligence that matched his own. She became not only his favored wife, but his confidant and strategist. Her whispered counsel, shaping decisions that would ripple through generations. In the flickering glow of torches, they plotted alliances and debated the future of their kingdom. Kaʻahumanu's voice, steady and low, often guided the king through storms of uncertainty. She understood the art of diplomacy, the necessity of forging bonds with rival chiefs, and the delicate balance required to unite fiercely independent peoples. Her father's influence as a trusted advisor to Kamehameha gave her a unique vantage point. She knew both the public face of rule and the secrets that moved behind closed doors. The court was a place of spectacle and order. Feathered capes, ahu ula, gleamed in the torchlight, their brilliant reds and yellows reserved for those of highest rank. The kapu system dictated the rhythms of daily life, where one could sit, what foods could be eaten, when silence must fall. Kaʻahumanu moved through these strictures with calm purpose, honoring tradition while never losing sight of her own ambitions. Her relationship with Kamehameha was complex, woven from threads of passion, pragmatism, and shared vision. At times, they were partners in affection. At others, their bond was tested by the demands of power and the shifting loyalties of the court. Yet they were united by a common goal, to bring the fractured islands into a single enduring kingdom. It was Kaʻahumanu who encouraged Kamehameha to seek alliances with chiefs of distant islands, to offer peace where war had failed, and to use marriage as a tool of unification. She saw the possibilities that lay beyond conquest, the hope of an enduring legacy, built not only on force, but on wisdom and compromise. Her influence was felt in the great councils, where her words, though spoken softly, carried the weight of foresight. The defining moment of their partnership came in 1795 at the Battle of Nuuanu. The valleys and cliffs of Oahu bore witness to a decisive struggle as Kamehameha's forces pressed forward, determined to bring the island under his rule. Kaʻahumanu's council had been instrumental in preparing for this campaign. Her diplomatic overtures helped secure the loyalty of key chiefs, while her understanding of court politics smoothed tensions among Kamehameha's own ranks. When the battle was won and the islands finally stood united under a single monarch, it was not just Kamehameha's victory, it was Kaʻahumanu's as well. She had shaped the path to unity, her wisdom woven into every triumph and every fragile peace. In the years that followed, Kaʻahumanu's presence at court remained steadfast. She presided over ceremonies and festivals, her bearing regal beneath the weight of her feathered cloak. She listened to petitions, settled disputes, and watched the slow evolution of a kingdom brought together by vision and resolve. She was both witness and architect, her life entwined with the fate of Hawaiʻi, her legacy already beginning to take root in the red earth and ocean winds. And so, as the palm fronds rustled and the torches flickered in the royal compound, Kaʻahumanu stood at the heart of change, a queen not only by marriage, but by the quiet, steady force of her own will. The kingdom mourned when Kamehameha's great heart fell silent in the spring of 1819. The mountains of Hawaiʻi Island seemed to bow beneath a hush, and the sea brought its gentle waves in tribute, as if even the old gods paused to mark the passing of a chief who had shaped the world. Yet beneath the outward stillness, the air was charged with uncertainty. Who would guide the islands now in the wake of so profound a loss? Kaʻahumanu did not falter. Where others hesitated, she stepped forward, her voice composed and clear. In the days following the king's death, she made a bold pronouncement, one that would ripple through the palaces and across the valleys. Kamehameha, she declared, had named her Kuhina Nui, co-ruler, equal in authority to his chosen heir, Liholiho, now called Kamehameha II. To many, the announcement was astonishing. The chiefly order had long been a domain of men, its codes engraved in the bones of tradition. Yet Kaʻahumanu's claim could not be dismissed. Her years beside Kamehameha, her lineage, and the strength of her will all lent gravity to her words. With the support of loyal chiefs and her father's old allies, she assumed her place as co-regent, a woman holding the reins of power in a world that had rarely imagined such a thing. Court life shifted around her. She presided over councils, her gaze steady as she weighed the words of ali'i and advisors. The responsibilities were immense, for the kingdom stood at a crossroads. Foreign ships now dotted the harbors, their tall masts rising above the palms like new kinds of trees. Traders, missionaries, and sailors brought unfamiliar customs and goods, whispering of lands far beyond the horizon. Yet the greatest change would come from within. Kaʻahumanu had long questioned the strictures of the kapu system, the ancient laws that governed every aspect of life, that set men and women apart at meals, that forbade the commoner from touching the shadow of a chief. She saw how the system could nurture order, yet also how it sometimes bred fear and division. With the king gone and the future uncertain, she sensed the time for change had come. In a gesture both simple and revolutionary, she sat to eat with Liholiho and other men, breaking the most sacred kapu. The court watched, breath held, as the old order was quietly defied. When no thunderbolt fell, no sign from the gods appeared, it was as if a spell had been broken. The Ainoa, free eating, began, and with it, centuries of religious law, unraveled in a single meal. The abolition of kapu sent shockwaves across the islands. Temples were dismantled, wooden idols toppled, priests left uncertain as the old gods receded into memory. Some wept for the loss of ancient ways. Others felt the first stirrings of liberation. Kaʻahumanu weathered the turmoil with calm resolve. She understood that to lead was to bear the sorrow of change, to watch beloved customs fade even as new possibilities dawned. It was during this season of upheaval that foreign ships arrived carrying Christian missionaries and their books of scripture. The timing seemed almost mythic. The old religion had fallen silent, just as a new faith sought to take root. Kaʻahumanu, always attuned to the winds of destiny, watched with a measured gaze, knowing that the islands stood on the threshold of another transformation. As the torches burned late into the night and the sound of chanting gave way to the soft hymns of newcomers, Kaʻahumanu's rule entered a new chapter. She was no longer only a queen or a consort. She was the Kuhina Nui, the axis upon which the future of Hawaiʻi would turn, her every decision echoing in the quiet gardens and storm-lashed cliffs of her homeland. In the years that followed the breaking of kapu, the islands drifted in a strange new tide. The temples once crowned with smoke and song now stood silent, their stones warmed by the morning sun and scattered with plumeria blossoms that had no priest to receive them. Old fears loosened their grip, but new uncertainties crept in, carried on the winds from distant shores. It was in this climate of questioning and possibility that the missionaries arrived. Their ships appeared in the harbors, with canvas wings and wooden hulls, bearing families whose language was foreign and whose ways were strange. They brought Bibles, printing presses, and dreams of redemption, their footsteps soft on the sand as they gazed in wonder at the green mountains and the glimmering reefs. At first, Kaʻahumanu regarded them with careful distance. She was wary of their customs, their insistence on a single god, their quiet disapproval of the old chants and dances. For years she watched as they built their churches of coral and timber, gathered the curious under the shade of breadfruit trees, and taught the children to read and write in a new tongue. The queen listened always to the pulse of her people, some drawn to the promise of literacy and healing, others wary of abandoning the stories that had shaped their souls. Yet the old world was gone, and Kaʻahumanu, ever attuned to the shifting currents, felt the need for new foundations. In 1825, after a period of reflection and grief, she made her decision. She was baptized in a quiet ceremony, taking the name Elizabeth in honor of the English Queen, and accepting the teachings of the Protestant missionaries. The water was cool upon her brow, the prayers soft and unfamiliar, their syllables weaving around her like a new kind of cloak. Her conversion was both public and personal. She became a devout student of the Bible, her sharp mind turning over the parables and proverbs, searching for wisdom that could bind a fractured kingdom. She saw in the Christian faith a source of order and discipline, a way to guide her people through the uncertainties of change. With characteristic resolve, she championed education, supporting the establishment of missionary schools, where children learned to read the scriptures and write their own names in careful lines. Kaʻahumanu's embrace of Christianity transformed the islands. She helped shape the kingdom's first written laws, drawing inspiration from the commandments and the teachings of the missionaries. Laws against adultery, drunkenness, and theft were enacted, often enforced with a severity that startled even those who supported reform. She decreed that the Sabbath be honored, and that those who broke the new moral codes must answer to the law. Yet the Queen's zeal was not without controversy. As churches rose and schools flourished, the old ways were sometimes pushed aside with too much haste. The hula and the chants were silenced in public. The tattooist's tools grew quiet. The stories of the gods faded from the firelight. Some whispered that the Queen had turned her back on her own heritage, that the land's spirit was growing thin beneath the weight of new beliefs. Kaʻahumanu felt this tension keenly. In her heart, she walked between the worlds, one foot in the lush mythic gardens of her ancestors, the other on the path of scripture and reform. She wore her new faith with dignity, yet the memory of old songs lingered in her dreams. In public, she stood as a pillar of Christian virtue, but in private, she grieved the loss of certain rituals, knowing that every transformation carries the ache of what is left behind. Still, she pressed forward, convinced that knowledge and discipline would strengthen her people. She traveled from village to village, encouraging the young to learn, the elders to build, the chiefs to embrace law. Her presence was a gentle, steady tide, reforming, guiding, and in time, healing. The islands, once ruled by Kapu and the old gods, now moved to a new rhythm, the voice of Kaʻahumanu, echoing through the valleys as both reformer and queen. In the long twilight of her reign, Kaʻahumanu became a figure both familiar and formidable, a queen traversing the islands not as a distant ruler, but as a living presence among her people. Her journeys were marked by simple processions and bursts of color. Flower garlands braided through her hair, the delicate rustle of silk and cotton, where once there had been only feathered cloaks. The sounds of hymn and prayer followed her from village to village, blending with the laughter of children and the steady rhythm of the surf. She traveled by canoe and horseback, her retinue moving with the measured pace that befits one who carries the weight of a kingdom. In the uplands of Maui and the green valleys of Kauai, she spoke of faith and law, urging chiefs and commoners alike to honor the new codes and to seek knowledge through books and scripture. Under her gaze, schools flourished, and the first generation of literate Hawaiians began to leave their mark upon the world. Kaʻahumanu's presence was both gentle and commanding. In gatherings beneath breadfruit trees, she read from the Bible, in a voice that was low but clear, the cadence of her words winding through the warm afternoon air. She was steadfast in her expectations, yet her compassion was evident. She listened to grievances, resolved disputes, and offered comfort to the sick and sorrowful. For many, she became not only a queen, but a symbol of stability in a world still shifting beneath their feet. In these later years, she turned her attention to the future, seeking to prepare the next generation for the burdens and blessings of rule. She mentored the young Kamehameha I, whose childhood had been shaped by turmoil and loss, and guided Queen Kaʻahumanu, another woman of formidable spirit who would follow in her footsteps as Kuhina Nui. Kaʻahumanu's own legacy was not to be measured by monuments or conquests, but by the living fabric of the kingdom, a tapestry of laws, schools, and new customs, held together by the force of her vision. Yet even as she worked tirelessly for reform, the queen felt the toll of age and illness. The gardens of Manoa Valley on the island of Oahu offered her a final place of peace. Here, in a home surrounded by flowers and the soft murmur of streams, she spent her last days. Psalms were sung at her bedside, and the scent of roses and pikake drifted on the breeze. Friends and family gathered in hushed reverence, the shadows lengthening as the queen's breath grew slow and shallow. On the 5th day of June in the year 1832, Kaʻahumanu slipped quietly from the world she had shaped. The valley seemed to hold its breath, the sun dipping gently behind the ridges as if in mourning. She was buried first at Moku Aweoweo, the royal tomb at Iolani Palace, her body wrapped in fine kapa and adorned with lace. Later, her remains would be moved to Mauna Ala, the royal mausoleum, joining the sacred line of chiefs whose bones anchor the islands in memory. Her legacy, though, was never confined to stone or grave. Kaʻahumanu left behind a kingdom transformed, a land where the old and new mingled in uneasy harmony, where women could wield power, where children could read, and where the laws of men, and not only the gods, shaped daily life. Her influence lingered in the songs sung at sunrise, in the silent prayers of school children, in the resilience of a people learning to walk in two worlds. Even now, in the hush of evening, you might sense her presence in the cool valley air, in the flicker of torchlight on the palace walls, in the soft rustle of leaves. The queen, who once stood at the crossroads of tradition and change, continues to guide Hawaiʻi, her spirit as enduring as the mountains that watched her rise and watched her go. In the years and generations that followed, the name Kaʻahumanu lingered on the lips of storytellers and in the quiet corners of memory. Her life became more than history. It became legend woven into the fabric of Hawaii, like the intricate patterns of a lauhala mat. Streets and schools now bear her name. Statues stand in shaded courtyards, flowers draped at their feet in silent tribute. She remains a presence, felt as much as seen, her story carried on the trade winds that sweep across mountains and sea. The people remember her as a woman of paradoxes, powerful and compassionate, fierce and nurturing, bold enough to shatter ancient customs, yet gentle in her counsel. Kaʻahumanu is sung of in mele and honored in hula, her image shimmering at the edge of myth. Some say she rode across the ridges of Maui on a swift white horse, her cape billowing behind her like the crimson clouds at sunset. Others recall how she confronted the priests at the heiau, her voice unwavering as she declared a new dawn for her people. There are stories of her summoning storms, her words stirring the tides, her spirit bending the world toward change. Yet beneath the mythic glow is the woman herself, a girl who once wandered barefoot through the rain-wet gardens of Hana, who listened to her elders' stories, beneath a sky jeweled with stars. She loved, she grieved, she dreamed. She made mistakes and bore the consequences. She stood at the heart of a kingdom in tumult, guided by a vision that saw beyond the horizon of her own time. Kaʻahumanu's legacy is not without controversy. Some mourn the swift passing of the old ways, the quieting of the chants, the loss of gods who had watched over the islands since the first voyagers arrived. Others praise her courage and foresight, her determination to bring literacy into new laws, to lift women to positions of influence, and to shape a nation that could endure the storms of change. Her choices were neither simple nor easy. They were the choices of a leader who understood that transformation, like the turning of the tide, brings both hope and sorrow. Today, as the sun sets over the emerald valleys and the warm breeze carries the scent of plumeria through open windows, Kaʻahumanu's story still whispers in the quiet spaces of Hawaiʻi. She is present in the laughter of children learning to write their first words, in the solemn processions at Mauna Ala where the bones of chiefs rest, in the songs sung at the edge of the sea as twilight falls. Her spirit endures in every act of renewal, in every moment when the old and new meet and find a way to move forward together. So let us remember her not only as a queen or a reformer, but as a woman whose life bridged the world of gods and men, whose choices shaped the destiny of an entire people. In her journey from the gardens of Hana to the throne of the islands, Kaʻahumanu showed that strength can be gentle and that true power often lies in the courage to change. As night settles and the islands drift once more into the hush of dreams, her story remains, a torch burning softly in the darkness, lighting the way for those who come after.